Welcome back to Thompson Hine's Coffee Chat series. My name is Cassandra Borchers. I'm a partner in Thompson Hine's Investment Management Practice Group and the chair of the Blockchain Cryptocurrencies Group. Joining me today is my colleague, Marc, Senior Counsel in the firm's Corporate and Transactions and Securities Group. He also focuses on investment management, business litigation, and joins me in the Blockchain and Cryptocurrencies Group. Marc has extensive experience with all aspects of federal and state securities, financial services regulation. Among other services, he counsels clients on implementing compliance programs with regulatory controls and on conducting internal investigations. And I would add external investigations and regulatory actions. Marc's been a big addition to the team. So while the jury is still out regarding crypto's regulatory future, the industry is emboldened and bullish given Grayscale's recent victory in the courts. Today, we are going to discuss the current winners and losers in this fight, if you will, and we will provide a brief overview and potential implications of Grayscale's recent win in the spot Bitcoin ETF space and its ongoing maybe ongoing battle with the SEC. We'll see what's going to happen after this court ruling. So we are also hoping that today's discussion will be interactive. If you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and enter that in the chat box found on the right-hand side of your screen. We will attempt to address all of those questions throughout the program, and we promise to follow up on any questions that we don't get to during our time together. So with that, let's get started. Once again, Marc, welcome. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me. And I really can't get enough of these topics. You and I talk all the time about how the most fascinating things trying to follow the law and regulation are really ripped from the headlines. And even preparing for this in the past week is no exception. You can almost take everything that you've researched, put it aside, and discuss what happened within the past 7 days. And so let's get started with that. I'm going to assume a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with ETFs, but let's give them just a little bit of background on the Bitcoin ETF, which is defined as a fund that allows investors to gain exposure to Bitcoin via traditional stock markets without needing to directly buy or sell the digital asset on a cryptocurrency exchange. So it goes without saying, obviously, that funds give you access to markets with a group of particular or basket of securities or reference securities. Bitcoin would be no exception to that. We should probably say that although we're talking about Bitcoin where appropriate, Ether has, in certain circumstances from regulators, also been blessed, and there are many other cryptocurrencies that are trying to become entrants in the market. But Cassandra, what are some of the unique differences for ETFs in the realm of Bitcoin?
Right. So with respect to Bitcoin, I mean, one of the differences is this isn't a stock, right? It's not a security. It's one of the few that the SEC has said is not a security. We've been fortunate. There's actually been some exposure to Bitcoin futures for the last couple of years, at least, in the registered fund space, and even an ETF in that space. But you've got some challenges. I mean, these aren't listed securities. You have the whole issue of custody and exchanges. The SEC is also currently in a bit of a tussle, if you will, with various exchanges that would like to be formally registered as such here in the United States, and they're just bringing action after action against a lot of different players in the cryptocurrency space, and that also relates to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, once again, is decentralized in the truest sense of the word. And so there isn't a specific organization that's behind it. What gives it its value is the fact that people are utilizing it, exchanging it, trading it. And as we have also seen in the last several years, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, you know, they're very volatile. Their prices have gone up and down. I think we're still technically, some people would say, in a crypto winter, although I'm not convinced. I know Bitcoin, with these recent court actions, has actually gained in value. And I looked back. So in October 2021, the Winklevoss twins, that you will remember from Facebook and some litigation surrounding that, but the Winklevoss twins have actually been very active in this space. And they had filed for the first spot Bitcoin ETF back in 2021. The SEC rejected it. I think they actually rejected it twice, saying it was a nascent industry, inadequate investor protections, you know, the same kind of arguments that SEC is currently using. But the price of Bitcoin when they launched that was only $90. And it's quite a bit higher at the moment, but it has gone up and down a fair amount.
That's an understatement, and it seems like even the events of just the past week have been really bullish for all types of crypto, and particularly Bitcoin ventures. We'll watch to see if that continues in this regulatory tussle. You know, you brought up an interesting point about Bitcoin specifically. There are many naysayers in the market about whether or not there is anything of underlying value in Bitcoin or lots of cryptocurrencies. Some will call it irrational exuberance. Others call it the next wave and iteration of transacting anything of value. And all across the continuum, those parties have debated. You raised a good point about the cryptocurrency exchanges and them finding a marketplace and talking with regulators about establishing that marketplace. And many people believe that the exchange itself is a great equalizer, that it creates a market that can be studied and researched, and individuals can use the marketplace itself for the thing of value. Other people say we don't need a market to do it, that willing buyers and sellers can come together, and that a legitimacy is really unnecessary. So it still remains to be seen whether the true devotees of using this as an alternative means of trading things of value really has the rush to market. But we can take a hint of what the market thinks about it by many institutional players who have jumped in to the space. You know, the last time we talked about the exchanges, we also discussed a fascinating, interesting fact that I discovered, that for all the risks attendant to cryptocurrency, there has yet to be an intrusion at the point of crypto exchanges. And so they've had a very difficult time getting insurance for their practices. And yet it's only when cryptocurrency is moving or being traded or stored in something other than a cold storage facility or a wallet that those risks are attendant to this new medium. The underlying value of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, yes, absolutely volatile, but it certainly has not much to do with the security. Since we're talking custody, I just thought I'd bring that in there. So, you know,
absolutely.
You know, how we got here to today. What's the current state of play? As I mentioned, there are lots of institutional players who are looking at this market and think it represents tremendous opportunity. We know that in June, the SEC accepted 6 applications for spot Bitcoin ETFs, including major names, VanEck, BlackRock, etc. And we were wondering what the future was going to be for some of these applications. In September, we started to see some amendments to some of these applications. I think that, like everyone else, these large institutional players are looking at some of the tug and pull and the fight. The SEC for itself said that it needed additional time. It filed an application to get an extension. do you think this was a stall tactic on behalf of the regulators to see where the courts were going to come out, or are they still grappling?
I think it was, I mean, my opinion would probably be that it's a bit of both. I think the commission is meeting this week on Thursday, and I expect there's going to be a lot of discussion around recent events, including this ruling with respect to the Bitcoin ETF. But one of the questions that I've gotten is, what's going to happen from here? So you've got all these ETFs that are on file. Will they just go through and approve them basically all in one day? I can't imagine that's going to happen. I think there may be further comments back and forth. Back in 2018, they actually rejected 9 in one day. So I guess the court has said they really have to consider each application. They can't just not review it or dismiss it because of these nebulous, inadequate investor protections they've been citing. So it will be really interesting to see what happens this week and next to come out of the SEC. We actually have a couple of questions, Mark. I don't know if you want to try to tackle a few of these.
Yeah, sure.
This is probably a good thing.
Yeah. So one question is, how should institutions or investors weigh the risk of the unknown identity of Satoshi Nakamoto and the fact that Homeland Security is on video saying that they interviewed the 4 Satoshis? So I don't know how far we want to go down the rabbit hole on this.
Yeah. So Satoshi Nakamoto, for anyone who doesn't know, is the father of Bitcoin, put out a white paper. I guess the debate is it one person? Is it several people? This seems to suggest Homeland Security has interviewed the 4 Satoshis. I mean, at this point, what do you think, Mark? I don't know that it really makes a difference at this point who Satoshi Nakamoto is.
Well, I mean, obviously, the entire industry has been riveted by the identity of this unknown inventor of the white paper. There are some theories that say that the genie's out of the bottle on this, and the inventor and the launcher is less important, other than titillating information. There are others who believe that there are really technological limitations that could be imposed by the originators and holders at the very beginning of the ledger. And there have been papers written about this, whether or not it represents a threat to markets because of actual control, or whether it just represents a potential threat to the market because of its ability to upset markets if the identity is known, if this is in fact one person or 4, right? So I am surprised that that the identity has not been proven out. I mean, we use blockchain to prove out everything else, and it seems like it would be doable, and maybe Homeland Security believes that it is done, but it's certainly still a mystery to the public. The other question, an interesting one, is whether you have thoughts on Ripple's recent win versus the SEC and XRP being the only digital asset with quote unquote legal clarity. Parenthetical says XRP is not a security, which is what the determination, I'd say partial determination of the Ripple decision.
I mean, I think we're making progress, which is good. You're right. I had overlooked Ripple. And it's actually a win, right? Because this went to the courts. I think several years ago, the SEC did some sort of analysis and said that Bitcoin and Ethereum were not securities. I think, quite frankly, they might regret that they ever did that. And I would say, it remains to be seen whether the SEC is going to adopt some sort of procedure for reviewing cryptocurrencies and making a determination as to whether or not they are a security, in its own right, or if they are going to accept filers or registrants' arguments around, the nature of the digital asset or cryptocurrency going forward without some sort of court enforcement behind it.
No, I would agree with that. For anyone who is wondering how settled or unsettled the market is with respect to these products, even without knowing and following the day-to-day headlines, one need only look at both the SEC's position and Ripple and the final decision to know that it was contorting itself in such an interesting way and cherry picking certain aspects of definitions under the test of what is a security or not a security to reach the conclusion. I had the inescapable belief that they were either going to have to form some rule or they were going to take some losses on this particular decision. It turns out that I agree with you. It might be both. And we'll get into this a little bit at the end, but I think there's a cautionary tale here and some lessons about particularly for nascent markets like we have in crypto, that there are some value in taking some shots. And certainly where you feel you have enough invested, or that the SEC really does not have that much of a leg to stand on, or that it is contorting itself to reach a particular conclusion. We've seen some institutions draw a line in the sand and decide that they were going to challenge it. So one interesting challenge that we've recently had for those who've been watching is the Grayscale litigation. And just on October 23rd, the DC Circuit Court upheld a lower court's finding in Grayscale's favor that the SEC had been capricious and arbitrary in its handling of Grayscale's application. So what do you make of that whole fight and this recent decision?
Well, I think, in a lot of ways, I feel like it has been a long time coming. And there's been a lot of criticism with the SEC, not only in recent years, but, kind of for the lifetime of cryptocurrencies ever since Bitcoin came out. It seems like in a lot of ways they just don't want to deal with it, right? And they do want to keep pushing it off. So now they're going to be forced to have to deal with it a little bit more. There have been points, Grayscale itself is an investment trust that's looking to convert to an ETF. So Grayscale kind of got through, if you will, at a time when not a lot in the space was being approved, but they managed to get a different type of product through and approved by the SEC. So with respect to ETFs, that's going to, open up the marketplace, make it more available to everyone in the context of, having some access or exposure to at least Bitcoin. I don't know, I just, it will be interesting to see how much kind of fight is left in the SEC, or if they're going to be more collaborative. They've also been sort of taking this on and investigating it for years, at least some of the people within the SEC. But I guess the other comment is how it's currently constituted. It feels like a lot of senior people have left, and they are ramping up in enforcement. Gensler has certainly been pushing a regulatory rules-based agenda with a lot of new rules coming online, but not necessarily with respect to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
That's an interesting point, because many who follow this space know and understand that they've been famously and unusually active. If you look at some of the rule proposals and all the things that were on its wish list, and even though this seems to be one of the most vexing, there seems to be a lot less guidance or effort into rolling out what some of the solutions are. Now, some of that may be that it's difficult to do that with some of the chaos. I agree with you that some of these recent decisions might help to nudge the regulators in the direction of trying to find some space or solutions. But you raise a good distinction for Grayscale. Some are proceeding as if this recent decision with respect to Grayscale, which I think the SEC actually still has some time to take action on it, but most are presuming, and at least the SEC is signaling, that it doesn't intend to fight this particular fight much more. But then it just has to move forward to either considering the application. It's not like it got granted, or it could reject it on other grounds. And so, do you think
different grounds?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that Grayscale represents a unique case that could slip in because, as you said, it's uniquely positioned, and the path to approval is only for similarly situated institutions? Or do you think it represents the seed change that a lot of devotees of the crypto marketplace are predicting?
I mean, I think it's going to have to represent a sea change. I don't know that the fact that it's conversion rather than a new ETF filing is dispositive with respect to the concerns around Bitcoin. And look, you've got a lot of other big players in this space. I mean, that's what it takes right now. It takes time, money, patience. Obviously, a lot of these firms have done that calculation and decided that it was worth all of those things in order to pursue these markets and open things up. You know, I mean, there are other registered funds that have gained access through Grayscale's current product, GBTC. So, you know, there are registered funds that have some limited exposure to Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. There are also a lot of private funds that are still investing in Bitcoin, perhaps other cryptocurrencies. That's been more challenging in the US because of the state of the cryptocurrency exchanges, but there are still private unregistered funds out there who are you know, working and trading in the space.
Well, that's an excellent point. And there are some who say, look, there are already so many investors and institutions who are heavily into this, right? And the solution is not going to be, at least the rational solution is not a decision that all of it is illegal, right? There will have to be a process, and remains to be seen how that shakes out. But there are many who are betting that in the first quarter of 2024 that we will see several other follow-on applications approved. And as you mentioned, they are not, you know, margin players. They are substantial leading institutions who are making some of these bets. Well, but look, no discussion about crypto would be complete without one of my favorites. My daily alerts are set to our friend SBF and the FTX trial. For those who may have been under a rock, SBF refers to Sam Bankman-Fried and the titular head of FTX, which famously started crashing and burning, and has led now to his current trial. Many looked at some of the facts that were rolling out when this first became news and thought that he would never be interested in going to trial. But anybody who thought that they could guess what is in the mind of this particular leader is surprised on a daily basis. I know that I certainly am. But what's the current state of this trial?
Well, he is currently on trial. He has been testifying just this week, and I do wish I had more time to sort of follow this because it's been quite a debacle. I mean, he's on trial for fraud, and that seems to be exactly what was going on, in the worst sorts of ways. It wasn't, he tries to paint himself as negligent and ignorant, unsophisticated business person who made some mistakes. I mean, the facts just really aren't bearing that out. It's shocking that shocking to me that FTX got as large as it did without this all coming out much, much sooner, because it was really quite a mess. Of course, they had a variety of different entities, but he was like the crypto darling, right? And I think a lot of people in the digital asset, cryptocurrency, blockchain space saw him as a true leader, like you said, as a renegade, as a brilliant young man who was going to, kind of take this out to the masses and popularize things. And where there's money to be had, there's always some bad actors, right? And it looks like he falls into that category. It seems as if he's having a difficult time even answering the simplest questions that are asked to him, and he is not coming off as charming and appealing while on trial as he was when he was out in the world running FTX.
Well, that's certainly been the case, and whether this ends up being the classic Ponzi, like they were using Caroline Ellison and her involvement to show that the funds of one institution in Alameda were really propping up other interests, really remains to be seen. But it seems that he can't seem to get out of his way. He's ignoring the court. He is violating the conditions of his release, and so I didn't see that he's really helping himself. But at the end of the day, I agree. He could just be, unfortunately, a garden variety case of an individual who's making an otherwise what could potentially be a legitimate industry, making the whole industry look bad. So
Yeah.
I think I probably follow it more closely than I need to, but it's kind of like a train wreck. I can't look away.
It is definitely hard to look away. And it's unfortunate, right? So I think, but like I said, there's always going to be bad actors out there. So on the one hand, you can appreciate where the SEC is coming from, right? In their scrutiny of all things, Bitcoin, Ethereum, cryptocurrency, Ripple, any sort of digital asset. You can understand to some extent where they're coming from. And I think the industry itself is looking to, this whole thing started, right? And the whole concept of decentralization, it's beyond any country, beyond any individual, beyond any entity, right? And so that, while that is really, that's to be applauded, right? That whole concept, but we still live in this world and deal with a variety of regulators and entities. And I think the concept initially that you wouldn't have to interact with any sort of a regulator with respect to any of these items was, not well placed. So now bringing, regulators into the game and trying to work with them to come up with, some sort of structure that's acceptable. Yeah, it's just going to be, it has been a long road, and it's going to continue to be a long road, and everyone has to be vigilant and and make sure that they are, they're bringing the best out in their colleagues, and a little bit of self-policing, quite frankly. Not to the extent that you can totally do that, but I think everyone's going to bear the brunt, right, of everyone's good and bad actions, unfortunately. So it behooves everyone to do better, be better, make sure they've got all the issues nailed down and addressed appropriately.
Well said. Well said. Well, I don't know if self-policing is definitely going to be the way forward, but I think most of the adults in the room appreciate that a well-constructed regulatory rubric will be useful in helping this industry launch and do so effectively. I see we're basically at the end of our time.
We are. We had one last question that I will read off. I don't know if you have a great answer, a quick answer for this, Marc. I don't know that there is a quick answer, but it's a really interesting thought and comment, so I wanted to read it in. The bankruptcy court is a critical source for clarity of the crypto industry, especially with respect to asset ownership on insolvent crypto exchanges. That's very true. We've seen that this year too. How the zone of bankruptcy is defined and how the automatic stay is implemented. The bankruptcy court and bar know that lack of clarity equals chaos. How do you think bankruptcy issues could shape the SEC's regulations and timelines? I think that's a fair question. I don't know that I have a great answer for it though. Marc, do you have any thoughts?
Quick answer, no. I was on a panel, though, of international barristers a few months ago, and this issue did come up. I actually think that U.S. regulators may look to the U.K. and how it is handling some of these issues in the bankruptcy context. And so I encourage people who are interested in this question to look at what some of the barristers across the pond are doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, with respect to all things, I suppose there are a variety of countries who are ahead of the U.S. because the U.S. has been really sticking its head in the sand a little bit and wanting these things to kind of go away. So with that, we are at the end of our time. If you have any final questions or comments, please feel free to email us directly. Our emails are on the website. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for the coffee chat today. Thank you, Marc, for all your time and effort and your expertise in this area. And I'll look forward to joining everyone next time. Until then, have a great day.
Bye-bye.